Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and welcome to another episode of ISTJ Info Dumping, the show where we take ordinary human beings and turn them into superheroes. Because I bet 99% of you watching this did not realize that ISTJs are actually capable of traveling through time without a time turner or a washing machine. Kudos to anyone who gets the washing machine reference, because, oh man, that game is underrated. So, if you're wondering what the heck are you trying to say, Paul, all this pseudo-time travel-y stuff is bending my mind. Oh wait, most of you are intuitive types. You probably think about that on a daily basis. Well, intuitives, it's your lucky day because I'm about to explain how what you've been imagining is actually possible. Maybe not for you, but you can at least know that it's a concept that certain human beings have the capability of using. Just like how in Harry Potter, not everyone is a wizard, not everyone has introverted sensing as their top function. In fact, the only other type that can say that is the ISFJ. So ISFJs in the comments, let me know what you do with your ability to recall the past, because your next function is extroverted feeling, which is my 7th function. So I'd love to hear what you guys do next. So what ISTJs and some ISFJs have a tendency to do is they have a tendency to be able to have this very vivid recollection of anything that's happened to them in the past. Then, because extroverted thinking is their secondary function, this is what allows them to take action with the information that they have, rather than just sitting around all day thinking about the stuff like the INTPs and INFPs do. ISTJs can say, now that I know how to fix a tire, that'll allow me to fix a car the next time the car breaks down. So, in other words, they don't just keep that information to themselves. They go and they talk about it. And some ISTJs, including myself, sometimes we just like to talk about it because extroverted thinking is extroverted, meaning it has to go out. All the stuff that we're thinking about has to be expressed. So sometimes ISTJs will just say, hey, did you know? And they can just be a walking encyclopedia of information. Sometimes when I go on live streams, I'll just say, hey guys, here's another fun fact that I can tell you. And people are just like, dang, Paul, you know everything about Nintendo. However, it's not just recalling information that makes ISTJs time travelers. It's also the ability to literally recall almost every detail of a past event as though it's still happening. And that's where I think we differentiate from the other types that have introverted sensing in their function stack, which would be the ESTJs, INFPs, ENFPs. Well, those are the 3 types that I can think of that share our functions. Even though they also have the ability to store and organize information, they're not constantly doing it. And the other thing is that they probably can recall these moments, but they can't actually live it. Let's take a couple of examples in my real life. Take the story of how I got out of depression, for example. There were these girls that I met at a conference that I was chaperoning, and those girls ended up essentially telling me to snap out of it and realize that people loved me and that I was worth a darn. The thing is, most people, when they have that kind of amazing experience, would recall the feeling in the moment. I know you INFJs are thinking that because I was just talking to one the other day, and that is the kind of stuff she would recall. But that would be the extent of it. ISTJs will, of course, recall the feeling, but they'll also recall where it was, the lighting, probably the carpeting. In fact, when I went to that conference in future years after that happened, I would walk over to the exact spot where it would happen, and I would stare at the piece of carpeting, and then if, say, the conference got a renovation since the last time I was there, I'd be able to say, that's different than what I remember. But that's not the only time I can do that. Sometimes, in fact, I'm even doing it right now as I'm speaking to you guys. I am in that moment. I am sitting against the backrest, and I am looking at the girls. Admittedly, I have face blindness, so that's the one thing I can't see very clearly in my mind, but I am observing that the wall ahead of me is white, and I'm observing that there's a little ledge over here. And ISTJs, when they like gesture and point towards something that they're recalling, they're not just pointing for the sake of it. They are actually recalling where the information is in 3D space. So when they're reliving a moment and they're just like, ah, yes, I remember that guy over there. Now, that in particular was an example, but when I was talking about the white wall in front of me, I was literally pointing to the white wall in my mind, because my mind is a 3D space, and it can tell approximately how far away it is from me and all of that. Not only that, but if I'm upset, I can just say, take me back to that time in 2016. And then I can all of a sudden go back and recall the feeling of the backpack on my shoulders. I can recall how it felt to pass over my notebook. And yes, sometimes that can lead to an ISTJ's version of daydreaming. Thankfully, we're sensing types, so it rarely impedes on our progress to get through in daily life. Generally speaking, when an ISTJ daydreams, they don't lose track of what's around them at the present moment. So that can lead to them being able to essentially live in two realities at once. However, this can easily backfire on them because, in my case, this particular memory is a good thing. It allows me to always recall the words of those girls so that if I'm ever feeling down again, which has happened since then, I can say, now wait a minute, Paul, these girls are telling me that I made a difference, not were telling me to make a difference. It's still happening right here, right now, and I'm recalling it vividly. Now, that doesn't mean ISTJs have perfect memories, but I think if any type were to have a photographic memory, I think ISTJs would be a good candidate. However, there can be pitfalls to this approach. This can also lead to a phenomenon known as avoidant personality disorder, which INFPs also have it because every type alternates between a judging and a perceiving function, and it always alternates between introvert and extrovert. So if you have an extroverted judging function, your secondary is going to be an introverted perceiving, and then back to an extroverted judging. And you get the pattern by now. It's always going to be alternating. So in other words, the tertiary function is always going to be the same as your dominant in terms of whether it's extroverted or introverted. So if you have an introverted judging function up here, or an introverted perceiving function up here, you'll have an introverted judging down here. So during a loop, or in the case of the ISTJ, to avoid confusing you guys, during an avoidant personality disorder moment, the introverted feeling and the introverted sensing don't have the extroverted thinking to help them do something about it. So now they're completely relying on their introversion, which means that all of a sudden, rather than being able to make, getting hair in my mouth, rather than being able to take an objective decision based on this, instead we become like the INTPs, where we're just stuck in this perpetual loop of, oh no, this feeling is so strong, I'm doomed. And then the ISTJs are unable to break out of that cycle of doom and gloom, and instead just constantly reliving the worst memories of their life. And if you take me, for example, I might be able to vividly recall the moment when my youth group kicked me out of the camping trip because of false accusations, and you wonder why I'm so paranoid about making sure I don't come across as a bad person. And all of a sudden, rather than being able to say, wait a minute, now that was then, ever since then, I've learned what girls like and don't like and have been able to adapt to their preferences in modern times. If only it were that simple. Sometimes I get so trapped in that moment that I can say, I don't know if I ever want to talk to a girl again, because what if that girl says that I'm in big trouble? And INFPs have a tendency to do this too, because every type that has the same first letter but different in the second, third, and fourth letters have the same loops. So INFPs have dominant introverted feeling and tertiary introverted sensing, which is just the inverse of how the ISTJs do it. So that means that whatever your type is, just take your first letter but change the other letters, and that's the only other type that shares your loop. So if you're an INFJ watching this, which you probably are because you're my biggest fan, the other type that would share your version of looping is the ISTP. So when this happens, ISTJs need to remember that they also have extroverted functions, even though they're an introvert, and then do something about it, and then apply a more pragmatic solution to the moment. So if I'm getting caught up in the paranoia of what happened in my youth group in my past, what I need to do instead is to say, okay, they are not here right now. In this moment, you are not back at the youth group. You are right here in your bedroom. You are right here with hair getting in your mouth while you're trying to record this tape. The fan is above you. You are in control. That's what the extroverted thinking does on an average day. But when an ISTJ is under stress or under the grip, they can forget about that. So conversely, that's why ISTJs also need very good friends, because extroverted thinking doesn't just mean coming up with a pragmatic solution of what to do. It also means taking the collective needs of the people. Now that can come across as extroverted feeling when I phrase it like that. But notice how I said needs, not wants. Extroverted feeling is all about making people feel happy, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. An extroverted feeler might say, hey, I got you a bar of chocolate, but that doesn't mean that the chocolate bar is healthy. Extroverted thinking, on the other hand, is going to look at what is absolutely necessary, completely filtering out human emotions, and instead just focusing on raw honesty. So the ISTJ might say, here, I got you some carrots, because carrots are objectively proven to be healthy and to help your eyesight. And so it can lead us to being cold and uncallous because we're so busy thinking about what's practical that we forget that humans have subjective wants and needs. We do too, so let's try not to be hypocrites. And because we are dominant introverted sensors, that means unlike the ESTJs and the ESFJs, where they are constantly recalling the needs/wants of the people, we need to have more human interactions because all we know is what we have experienced personally with our introverted sensing. So when an ISTJ is hanging out with their friends can say, oh, hey, Paul, so you want to know what people actually need? Well, let me give you some more information. Maybe let me take my friend Allison. She's a nurse. And so as a nurse, she can give me information about the anatomy of a girl. And I can say, oh, I see. So you're telling me that because a girl is shaped like this, that's why they dress a certain way, because they have to accommodate for the shape of their body. That is so fascinating. I never would have come up with that had you not been there to give me that perspective. That's why I don't talk about modesty on this channel ever since I learned that fact. So, by adding to their database, the ISTJ can even further be able to give people what they absolutely need. So in other words, not only can ISTJs constantly relive the past and constantly be going back to those moments, but they can also keep adding to their database by listening to the opinions of others. Admittedly, most ISTJs take some effort getting to that point. A lot of ISTJs, because their introverted sensing is so strong and their extroverted intuition is all the way down here and their extroverted feeling is all the way over here, that leads to them being reluctant to hear new ideas. But if we realize, guys, extroverted feeling is not, or extroverted intuition is not that scary, we could essentially become far less miserable if we realize that we're not the only ones in the world that are right. Now, admittedly, we don't think we're right as much as the ESTJs do, but ISTJs sometimes have this complex of, it worked for me, so it must always work. And the thing is, things change, and things aren't ever going to be exactly the same as how the ISTJ remembers it. Now, ISTJs are very routine people. Personally, for me, I like to eat a bowl of Lucky Charms every single day, but that doesn't mean I'm going to have the exact same Lucky Charms every single time. The order that the cereal is arranged in the box is going to be different every time I pour it. So therefore, even though I eat the same cereal, it's going to be in a different sequence. My stomach may have digested at a different rate than the last time. I might not pour the exact same amount of milk, but there's going to be a subtle difference. In the same way, even if an ISTJ goes back to moments that ended up impacting their life, it's always going to be different because you can't really replicate a first time experience unless, I don't know, you have amnesia or something. So, as much as we ISTJs love to try to create scenarios where we can relive the past, the only way we're going to be able to do that is to go back in time and relive that very first moment. So, what am I trying to get at with this analogy? Is that nothing can ever be 100% routine and nothing can ever be 100% the same. Because as we mature and as time passes, we realize that there's differences. When I went back to that conference, there was a bench. There wasn't just a floor like there was when I was there. In the same way, I was not in depression the second time I was at the conference. I was better. So instead of constantly wanting to relive that moment, I need to think to myself, why do I need to relive that moment? That was done in a moment where I was in depression, ready to end my life. But I don't want to end my life anymore, so I don't need to relive that memory. So you see how my extroverted thinking and my extroverted intuition are starting to see where the differences are. But most ISTJs don't come to that realization if they don't have trusted people in their life willing to help them come to that realization. Had I not had very good friends that were well developed with their intuition, I probably would be stuck in this endless loop of recalling my very first mission trip. And when those girls gave me that hug that changed my life, and just being like, I must create another atmosphere where there's something like Four Corners, and I've got to get the lighting just right, and I got to keep going on mission trips to keep feeding me that similar experience. It's simply not going to happen. I simply have to be thankful that I have the ability to recall it as well as I do within my head. And then realize that there can be something similar in the future, but it's never going to be identical. So I hope that managed to make sense for you guys. If it didn't, honestly, I don't blame you. From what I've heard, all of the Myers-Briggs types that don't use extroverted sensing, which off the top of my head are the ENFJs, or the NFJs, the STPs, I can't think right now, but half of the Myers-Briggs types don't use introverted sensing in their top 4. So for them, it's really hard to grasp what that function even is, because I've been told it's the most abstract function. So a lot of this is going to sound like gibberish to you guys. But to the best of my ability, I hope I've at least been able to give you my perspective on having such an abstract function. I mean, for me, introverted intuition is as confusing as you see introverted sensing. So I really hope that you guys can appreciate the amount of effort ISTJs put into being able to preserve something that existed a long time ago, but also that you can appreciate the times when you have really helped us to avoid getting into those loops. Because dang, if I had no friends whatsoever, I would have been so much less healthy of an individual. So let me know in the comment section what you think about this episode, and until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and if you know of a way that I can literally go back in time so that I can actually relive the moment of that first Four Corners, but with my original memories intact, I would absolutely love to experience something like that. Just hope I don't get into an unhealthy habit. Bye!